everybody. Different kind of series today. Just get relaxed. Peace. Up. Show music. And we're going to talk about the Bible today. I have a lot of things to say about the Bible. And I think that even if you don't believe the stuff that really happened in there, if you don't believe stuff really happened the way that it says it does, there's still a lot of good things that even an atheist could pull from that and put into their life and learn from it, right? You don't have to agree with something for it to be useful. So that's the approach that I'm going to take. And I'm just going to cover the format of the series. And I got it up there on the screen, but I'll read through it for people who are watching on their phones. It's a little small. This study's primary focus is to pull useful pieces of information from the Bible and to make them applicable to everyday life. That means that this series will be useless to anyone who already has the position that religion is not useful. So I'm begging my own question, and because it's my show, I'm allowed to do that. So yes, I agree. There's a position to be made that religion isn't useful. That's a different show, and I'd go on it. That'd be fun. The second thing is I read all the comments, and some of the questions I'm going to get to if I think I can. And because I want to be true to the title of this, if somebody wants to make the case that something is or isn't right, well, that's a different show too, because this show isn't what everybody thinks. It's what Tom thinks the Bible means. So that would be a better place, like my Chad Talks, where I could take both sides. But this one is literally going to focus on what I believe to be true, and I'm not going to go through the burden of proof, because my show title lets me get away with not doing that, because it's not what Tom knows is true. And I think that's all of religion. It's what you think is true and what you're going to act like is true. So that's what you're going to get here. Third is I'm gonna try to be objective about this. I'm not going to assume that things did or didn't happen, or that I can prove anything based on this stuff. This is a faith-based exercise, and so what the Bible says, there's faith that goes into that, and this series assumes that is true if you are being honest about what it means to assume that religion is worth doing this. So yes, you can say I don't have faith and I would never have faith. Well, then you can't play this game, and that's okay. There's a lot of other games you can play, but the game where you assume religion is true to explore it is not a game you can play if you don't assume religion is true. So I'm sorry, that's how it is. Next thing. You can expect me to try to pull examples from the text, and I'm going to say, this is what I think this means and how it can help me today. Do not expect the value of religion to be questioned. I covered that more or less, but I can be devil's advocate. But I'm not going to be devil's advocate on a show where I'm talking about how good religion is. I don't want to be the devil on that show. You can see how that's a bad idea. And then finally, I'm going to jump around. So this week I might be Genesis. I will be, spoiler alert. I'm going to start in the beginning because, yeah, that's a good place to start, I guess. But I'm not going to go like cover to cover. That's not how I know the Bible. I know some of the stories, and I know like the highlights, and that's the stuff I'm going to cover, the stuff I know, because. So without further anything, let's get into this. So this is my stream layout here, and I see my green screen's acting up just a little bit, but that's okay. I can fix it while we talk. So I've got a bunch of different symbols and iconography here. So I'm really trying to show the different ways that religion has been used in the past, and all of the different depictions. And I think that's about as good as I'm going to get there. Slightly ghostly. This is not an impersonation of the Holy Ghost. And yeah, let's get going then. So in In the beginning, here's the first text. We're going to talk about Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. We're going to go through the creation story. In the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. Additionally, I'm using the King James Version of the Bible for this study. I will look at alternate translations when the language loses some of the potential meaning, because I think that when you translate a book, the positions that you don't understand can be lost just by accident. When you choose a word that can have four meanings, and it needs to have four meanings, and you replace it with one that only has one meaning. So you literally change the intended message. Hebrew was a language that was very complicated, and it takes a lot of study to learn Hebrew. And one of the reasons that Hebrew is a good language for the Bible is it's very precise. It's able to be very precise in what it says, including like going the second step and saying, okay, you can't misunderstand what I'm saying because this word specifically means the opposite of what you're trying to transform it into by not understanding it correctly. So that's not to say the information contained is correct, but it is very close, if not exactly, the information the author was trying to give us. So that's the information I'm going to try and be looking at, as well as what the author said, not how people have translated it and not how things have been lost. So King James Version, they're going to have some these and some thous, and thy shalt. Get used to it, I suppose. Right? You won't. But here we go. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was without form and void. Darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved on the face of the waters. God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There was evening, and there was morning the first day. Well, that's pretty good. So the first angle I'm going to show here is the literal. This is the story of creation. This is a big man in the sky, a father figure, an all-powerful being who says, let there be light. And hello, there's some light. And that's kind of like where some Christians say that's where everything began. And some people say that was the Big Bang. What I think that means is I'm not going to find any scientific answers in the Bible, because the Bible wasn't written by scientists. Scientists are new. You know, they didn't exist before we invented them. So they didn't write Bible. So they're not like with the notepads and their sketchings and measurements. So you can't make that comparison. I won't make that comparison because it's not fair. It's not a fair assumption to make. Like, oh, those people don't have matter transporters. What rubes. It's out of context. So context is important. So what I see here is a story of creation, and psychologically, to me, that's where I'm going to go with a lot of my symbolism here. And the most useful thing to take out of the creation story comes from an idea, the idea of higher powers. And you hear a lot about higher powers when Christians and atheists have a debate. The Christians say God is the higher power, and the atheist says God doesn't exist. So he can't be the higher power. So who's left? And ultimately, the atheist lands on either themselves or the person they trust the most to get things right more than them. So for this series, God and higher power are going to be interchangeable in terms of the psychological meaning. And I think specifically the Bible is a story of a psychological handbook that takes us from the cradle when we're born and we don't know anything except how to be selfish little monsters who cry and bite and poop ourselves. And then through a series of characters and stories and many different things that are versions of stories that happen today, it shows how a person can transform what their higher power is and how their life turns out when that higher power is followed. And let me tell you, the Old Testament is not people getting it right. The Old Testament is people figuring it out and growing from it. That's why it's so bloody. That's why there's so much conflict. That's why there's so much betrayal, so much self-serving things and going against things that you know are good. All of those things exist inside a person who doesn't have themselves figured out, and that's all of us. So that's the parable that I see when I look at the Bible as a text outside of the religion. And the way that that view is compatible with my religious belief is, if you're God and you give us something as complicated as free will, well, it's not free if we're not allowed to use it to screw everything up. And so what do? Do you take away the free will and protect us from ourselves? You could do that. That's what you do to cats. Is that how we should be treated by God? Is that how God wants to treat us? Are we pets that need to be corralled and restrained and limited so that our potential is not decided by the gifts he gave us? It's decided by how responsibly he thinks some of us would use them. So when I ask myself that question, the answer is God can't step in and use our free will for us without taking it away. And everything you read in the Bible talks about groups and tribes. And when I look at the world, I see one tribe, like the split tribes of Israel, and then everyone on the outside too. So part of the reason why things are so bad is we're doing it wrong. Humanity is not meant to thrive and excel and use the limits of its free will as competing individuals. I think the Bible is the book on how mankind is supposed to get the individual to the state of mind where that individual can participate in the single most powerful thing that exists, and that is the potential of the human race working cooperatively together. I think the Bible is the roadmap for the individual to be able to join that group, that very specific group of people who are willing to go into their heads and say, how fucked up am I? What happened to me when I was younger that I still carry with me, and what did me in, and how do I do myself in? That's the things that limit us. And if you run from them, I know what happens when I ran from them. They kept chasing me because they were attached to me. Like, you can't run from something that's attached to you. At least I couldn't. I couldn't run fast enough. It always caught me. But when I turned around and looked at it and said, okay, I'm going to face this and try to figure the damn thing out, well, that's where things started getting better. And then that's when I started to look into the Bible and see, oh my God, that's what I was doing. I was that character. And when I realized what that character needed to learn, and I started applying that to my own behavior, well, hot damn, that went away. And my life got better. And I felt better. So that's the value I see in religion, even to a non-religious person, is the psychological map was either written by somebody who knew they couldn't interfere with you without taking away your free will, and they left you an instruction manual that's written in a language you don't understand yet, because the instruction manual is written in the language that you need to understand to be able to be a part of a world that isn't full of unnecessary suffering. So yes, it won't make sense because it can't make sense, because the purpose is you have to figure out how it makes sense first before it's going to make sense, just like everything else. There's no shortcut to the Bible. And I think the Bible is the journey. So yes, it's not a shortcut to read the Bible. It's a journey to read the Bible. It is a shortcut to say, what do you think of the Bible? Oh, that's wrong. Well, you didn't do it. You got exactly what you put into it. So now, having set that up, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Let's talk about that from a psychological perspective. Every idea that you had for the first time at one point in your life. That's true, right? You're not born with all your ideas, and hopefully you haven't had the best ones you'll ever have yet. So, in the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. That sounds a lot like the balance between the body, the conscious mind, and the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind. You have the earth was without form. That's your conscious mind without input. You're just there. You're a creature of comparison. That's what your conscious mind does. It thinks, it compares, it evaluates. So when there's nothing to compare or evaluate, nothing of value can exist. Nothing can exist. So it's formless. And then on the darkness was upon the face of the deep. The deep, that is your subconscious mind. That is the subconscious mind. That is everything you've ever seen but can't remember. Everything you've ever experienced. Every pattern that we come into contact with. That is the subconscious mind, and it has access to all of that. But it's the deep. You can't get to it. You don't have access. Nobody has access to it. And you can go swimming in it for a little while, and those people who take hallucinogens to go deeper into that, and they try to bring things up with them, and you hear stories about that all the time where this musician took this substance, and all of a sudden their magnum opus presented itself like it was there for their entire life. That's pushing the boundaries of the conscious and the subconscious mind, and that is what the Spirit of God is. The Holy Spirit moved upon the face of the waters. That is the body. That is the messenger. That is the carrier of information. Your body gets stimuli. So looking at this psychologically, your body receives a stimuli as it scans. Your body has no stimuli as it scans the surface, and it's just everything existing in a moment before comparison needs to be made. And then finally, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Well, that's the same thing as an idea, right? Your subconscious, that's your highest power. In the conscious, subconscious, and biological sense, the most powerful of the three is by far the subconscious. The physical body can be afraid. The subconscious mind can make you afraid of something that doesn't make sense. The subconscious mind has natural control over your fight or flight response. And that is how you're curious. That's why you pick projects that you like. That's why you're drawn to certain things. Certain things are just fascinating, and that's the subconscious mind. And that subconscious mind always wants to tell you the same thing. Okay? The messages are so different and varied, but they're always the same thing. And that is, the subconscious mind is on your side. It's trying to give you something that will help you because it is a part of you, and it wants to thrive just as much as you do. So it's a part of yourself that you can't communicate with, that can't communicate with you, but it can communicate with the body. And you can communicate with the body as your conscious mind. And so using that sort of three-part thing, that's where the 3-in-1 Trinity comes from. And it's conscious mind, subconscious mind, and the body chemical nervous system. Those three things are found in almost every major teaching. There's always a 3 mixed in there. And it's like martial arts, mind, body, spirit, right? And you find it all over the place. So that to me is what God the Father means from a psychologically symbolic perspective. Okay. Next part. God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. Well, that's the conscious mind again, your highest power. Now, you have this thing in front of you. You have light. The Spirit went over, and now there's light there. So now you have a thing to compare. That is what the conscious mind does. It latches onto things and compares them and evaluates them and judges them. And God, let there be light. And that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. That's the same thing when you have a new idea. You don't know what it means right away. Like the moment it happens, you have to decide if it's good. So God saw the light, that it was good. Like he saw the light and he saw that it was good. Okay, why would you check if you didn't want to be sure? Like you check everything you make if you're a craftsman. And in the story of the creation, God is the ultimate craftsman. And human beings being made in God's image, which comes up later, are also natural craftsmen. We make stuff all the time. We do it for fun. We can't not do it, right? I know I can't not do stuff, like make videos and all that. So he looked at what he made and said it was good. And then he divided the light from the darkness. And that's what we do when we make a new idea, right? There's parts of it that make sense. You'd be like, yeah, this is like that one time I did that, and this is from that book I read. And if I put all that together, that makes sense. And then you think about, well, what about the weight of an African swallow trying to fly across Africa? Well, then you say, well, wait a minute, what does that have to do with anything? That doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. It's gone, right? So you separate the parts of your idea that are relevant from everything else. So you condense the idea down as much as possible into this little nugget of light. And that's the conscious representation of that right there. So we're going through, the days of creation are going through the process of having an idea and being sentient, and what it means to do that, and where it comes from. So you are God in this psychological comparison. First, there's nothing, and then your subconscious produces an idea, and you have to decide if it's good. And then moving on now. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the water from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. Well, I got to look up firmament. Firmament. The heavens or the sky. Okay, got it. Alternate meaning in English is a sphere or worldview as a collection of people. Okay. So yes, you have the heavens and the sky, and he divided that. Okay, so think about that. You have water, and you have the sky, which is also water, right? And if you're not a scientist and you look at the world through your eyes, you see water and you see clouds, and maybe you notice that it rains. And then you think, well, water lives in the clouds too. And it kind of does, because it's all water vapor, and water lives in the air because we have dehumidifiers. So it's actually pretty good where they notice that there's a separation between the water and the waters. And if you look at that, the sky, again, if you're talking psychologically speaking, your ideas are not complete when you have them. Nobody's ideas are complete when they have them. And the reason for that is you don't know where they come from or how they get there. They just appear. So here is the separation between the sky and the waters. You have the waters, and everything below it is still the inaccessible subconscious mind. Can't reach it, but it's there. And now you have this also water-like substance that is in the sky, and it's visible, and you can see through it, and it's beautiful, and it does all these things. And that is where that part of it happens. So it's recognizing that even though you just had this idea and it is a creation of sorts, not complete to your conscious mind, because there are things underneath it living inside that aren't clear. That was the second day. God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let dry land appear." It was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called the seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and fruit, the tree yielding fruit after its kind, whose seed is upon itself." Oh, I forgot, I have these cool little pictures. Okay, so this is "Let there be light." And this is the waters, like the waters being formed from the deep, and this is the separation. So that's the second day. So here, it looks like it skips the third day. So I'm gonna, oh no, here it is. So yeah, so this is the creation of the land and the plant, and all of the different things that came from that. The seed was upon itself. Scroll down. The fruit tree yielding fruit after its kind, and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, yielding seed of its kind. The tree yielding fruit, seed of its kind, and so on. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. So let's talk about that then. If I'm continuing my symbolic analysis, then the next stage of having an idea where you can see part of it, and that's the sky, the conscious mind, and then the subconscious part of it, which is still the deep underwater. Well, now you get dry land. And this is the third phase of an idea, okay? You have it. It's created from nothing. Let there be light. You separate out the parts you understand from the parts you don't. And now you have something that you can stand on. The idea has a root. It's stable. You can build on it. And that's exactly what is shown here. And the variety that is shown here is anything. Trees or grass. Simple things. Great things. Things that make more of themselves. Right? Think about that. If you have a really good idea, what do? You don't keep it to yourself. You tell people because you're excited about it. At least I do. Or you make some money on it, and you do that too, and everybody's happy. So the good ideas that spring forth from these trees, that's the thing that's being shown here, is once you have an idea that came from nothing, it can still bear fruit that is good enough to reproduce. So think about that. You give somebody your idea. Well, they don't take your idea. They can't. You can't give somebody a thing. It doesn't exist. It only exists inside your imagination. And the only way you can express it is the words that come out of your mouth. So you don't get to share an idea in the classical sense of where you can take something and give it to somebody. You need to create that idea. And you need to create the possibility of that idea in that other person. And that's the fruit. It's good. There's something about it that makes you so happy, so interested, so peaceful, like there's some deeper truth there, that when a person encounters this idea that you've developed to the point where it's now a piece of fruit, right? It's fully formed and it's capable of reproducing itself. And they take that and they eat it, or they think about it, and then the same thing happens because it's a seed, right? It's going to grow what it was. So it's going to try to remake itself. And just like different plants grow in different soil, which is a parable in the Bible, the same seed is going to make a bunch of different things in a bunch of different people. But the fruit will always try to make the seed that it was born from. So that's kind of how the idea is parallel to the plants on Earth. Once you have something stable, then that's the psychology, the stable I place to make an idea, your first core fact. They call it an axiom in philosophy. The thing that you don't question. I think, therefore I am. The self-evident truth. Once you have that, and you recognize that that's what you have, that can get you in trouble if you pick the wrong one. So axioms, don't get too attached to them because they're usually wrong. But they can be right enough that they're useful. And they can be useful enough to grow fruit like this. And that fruit is what is then taken and reproduced. So that is the meaning behind the third day. Now I'm going to go to what I think about the next one. And then let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the firmament in heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser night to rule the night. He also made the stars. And God set the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. There was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. So the sun, the moon, and the stars have a picture here. So now this is a great story either way. Like, I like the idea that when I look up at the night sky, that there's so much cool stuff out there that I never get to see, except in computer CGI. Like, you get these things that are bigger. They're incomprehensibly big. They're bigger than our solar system big. Like, what does that even look like? Like, how do you visualize that? And then you look up at the night sky and there's just so much variety, but it's all made of the same things. So that's an aside just about the absolute captivating nature of the cosmos itself. And if you want to feel small and you want to feel special at the same time, figure out what it is about the night sky that makes that happen inside you, because it's a very good place to find both of those things where they meet each other. And that is a good feeling once you have it right. But let's go back to the psychology of it and what is useful for me if I'm thinking about that, if I'm trying to build a map of how my mind works. And I believe this author has left me clues to continue that. And I look at the stars and the sun and the moon. Well, that sounds very similar to the Jungian concept of the shadow and the ego, right? I don't know what Jung called his ego, but the part of you that's in charge is your person, your persona, something like that. And the part of you that you reject is your shadow. So look at this. God said, let there be days to divide from night, signs to seasons, etc. So the two great lights is what I'm talking about right now. The great light is your conscious mind. That's the sun, right? That's the you. You're the higher power. Okay? In many, many, many cultures, the sun is often regarded as the single highest power there is, because at the time that's what it was. They weren't scientists, and they knew this thing could literally burn them if they stayed at it too long. And if you looked at it too long, you went blind. And it's hot, and it does all these things, and it goes, and it comes, and you're like, what the hell is that? Like, nobody is there to explain to you what's going on. That's a thing. Okay? And so that's the significance of the sun in this passage here. You're the guy that's in charge. You're the highest power in your mind. And that great light governs the day. But the lesser night, the lesser light to rule the night, well, that is a reflection of the sun. The light hits the moon and bounces back. So it is the same light source that reaches us through two completely different paths. And if you think about it, what happens when light bounces off of a mirror and you see it? Well, the light gets reversed, right? I mean, you can't read stuff in a mirror normally. It gets backwards. Well, we know this to be true from our study of the mind and the subconscious mind, that your subconscious mind is a backwards and inverted language creature. And that is because your brainstem, it comes and does one of these. You've got your left hemisphere and your right hemisphere. There's a lot of crossing over. And the point is that your subconscious mind speaks backwards language. And so part of you that governs the day, the part you're aware of, that's your conscious mind. And the part of you that is the inverted reflection, it still guides you, but you can't see it. And then that's one layer of analysis. Now, let's apply that. The moon now could be the shadow. The shadow are the parts of you that you reject, okay? Everything that you say about yourself that is good, and these are very abridged. These are what Tom thinks all of these things mean. And I don't have to constantly put the boundaries there. You can figure that out on your own. The shadow are the parts of you that you don't like, are the parts of you that you reject, you suppress. So if you're a nice person, you pride yourself on how nice you are, and you haven't done any looking at your shadow, there's going to be a resentment for all the parts of you that aren't nice. And there's going to be a deeper resentment for all the people around you who aren't as nice as you try to be. And that's the shadow. The shadow is that resentment. The shadow is that nasty feeling that comes along with the ideas we have about what it means to be a certain way. I'm very patient, which means you're probably not very tolerant of impatient people. And you probably don't like that about yourself. When someone who has looked at the shadow would say, well, man, I think it's good to be patient. But boy, do I get impatient when somebody isn't patient with me. Ooh. And then you recognize that. And now your shadow is like, hello, thank you. And the takeaway there is that's a part of you. It's not a part of you that's uncontrollable. It's just a part of you that deserves to be heard. Because once we listen to it, this is the whole theory behind it. Once you listen to what the shadow has to say, it stops bothering you. And it lets you be in charge more. And you don't have to fight it. Because anything that you fight inside yourself is going to fight back. That includes the parts of you that you don't like. You got to make friends with them and figure out how to fit them in somehow. Give them a job, make them productive. Put them in charge of the one thing where that nasty character trait actually is a strength and a positive, and corral that with a bunch of morality. Well, that's how you do that. And then that's the third part here. He also made the stars. So you have the big light, which is your conscious mind. The little light, which is your shadow, the parts of you you don't integrate. And then the stars, it's everybody else. Everybody else are the stars, okay? And the reason that is why it's so beautiful is because those are the smallest reflections that are possible that you can see. And we can measure ourselves that way too. And that's how we measure ourselves. You go out into the world and you talk to people. And people will say, hey, this thing that you did was really good. And by the way, your car is a piece of crap. And I think you're ugly. Well, that's not very nice. But maybe your car is a piece of crap, and maybe you are ugly. So at what point do you forget about the part of it that doesn't feel good? And when do you look at the part and say, well, man, maybe I could stand to lose about 100 pounds because I was that way. I was very overweight at one time, and I needed to lose about 80 pounds, and it was very rough. And that's the sort of thing where when people you care about walk up to you and say, hey, Tom, you're looking a little big there. And you got to go, yeah, I am. Boy, am I getting fat. And on the inside, you're just dying because it's true. So that's what the stars are, these little reflections that are very easy to ignore and that go away when the big light shines, right? That's why it makes so much sense to me from a psychological guidebook perspective, because so far I'm only half a thing in, and it's almost exactly how a person can have an idea and then compare it out in the world. Let's go to the next day. Fourth day. And God said, okay, so we got this page here. All right. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that have life, fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. God created great whales, every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. So now we're getting to the animals. And that's where you could go a lot of different directions. I view the animals as the parts of you and the parts of us, to continue the psychological symbolism. The animals are the parts of us that desire. Okay, they're the in Freudian psychology, they would be, I think they're the id. They're the part of you that craves your body. Okay, so the animals now I see as a symbol of the different things that are in you, the different desires and urges, and they all are very different. And they move around with each other, and they all swim together, and they share the same space, and they share the same sky. And sometimes things can jump out and grab things and pull them under. And sometimes things can crawl up from under and become part of the sky. And these are all the different parts of us. And some of these, he said, are great whales. Like, have you ever seen somebody lose their cool in a way that wasn't dignified? Where they made just a total ass of themselves, and they couldn't help it. Okay, well that's, and if you've done that, like I've done that before, that's not a good thing. It's been a long time since I was the kind of person who would do that sort of thing, but it happened. Say things you don't mean, or maybe you say things and you do mean it, right? If you want it to hurt, and so you do it, and maybe convince yourself that that was a good idea and it felt good and it was worth it. That feeling that it was worth it, that's the trap. Because now you have to say it wasn't worth it before you can fix the thing that you know was pretty fucked up, that was mean. Well, that's two things now that are hard instead of just the one. Better to just do the one. But if you have to do both, it's better to do both than to do nothing at all. Say that, because it's misery if you don't. So that's kind of now. So now we have this nothing that is starting to be integrated with all of these desires and all of these different things that are feeding into it and around it. And still, it was good. It was the fifth day. And then finally, we got the sixth day. Well, here's some more of the animals. I like the animations. The illustrations in this, I think it's really nice. This is the Kingstone Bible, Volume 1. There's 3 of them. They're like $45 on Amazon. I'll put a link to it when I remember to. So yeah, this is all the different kind of animals. But then on the sixth day, God said, let us make man in our own image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and the fowl of the air and over the cattle and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl, and over every living thing that moveth on the earth. God said, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree which is the tree of yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. And every beast of the earth, and every fowl of the air, and every living thing that creep upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat, and it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. So this is where it all gets tied together. And this is where the psychological symbolism for me just is really, really cool. Let's go to verse number 24? No, 26. All right, here it is. And God said, let us make man, there it is. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over everything that creeps in the earth. So, I already talked about what all that stuff means. Let's make man in our image. So God is the thing that makes everything in this story, right? So God is the thing that understands. And let us make man in our image. So God is trying to make a thing that understands. Man, right? And he says, here's how he's going to do it. Number one, we're going to make him in our likeness. So we're going to give him the tools he needs to do this. That's very important. That's one of the most critical passages in the book of Genesis to me, is that God made man in his image. And the reason I think it's so important is because he said it three different ways, the author. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. That's twice. Male and female, he created them. That's a commentary on the nature of God, which is, you have the yin and the yang, right? The separation, the masculine and the feminine. So he is laying out here that the image of God is a blend of the masculine and the feminine. It's not one or the other. And you'll see that after the fall, where he will put enmity between you and the woman. Like, things are fine when man and woman view themselves as complementary parts of each other, rather than competitive parts competing in a zero-sum game where there is a winner and a loser. That is the wrong way to use the machine, so it were. And of course, you're miserable when you do it that way, is the response. But let's talk about that. He said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea. So notice he said, and let them have. So that's not the man Adam so much. He's talking about, maybe it's Adam is the first one in the story, and Adam is the one being referred to, but that there it seems to be, let us make man in our image, and let them have dominion. That's man as in the mankind, the humankind, the human race. That's where that comes from. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and the fowl of the air, and the cattle, and every other creeping thing. So all of those flying things, the impulses, the different competing parts of us, let us have dominion over them. That means that it doesn't say let us destroy them, or let us, get rid of them, or change them. That's not the message, and that's why I think it's so brilliant. It's because let us have dominion over them is different. That means you have control. You've integrated them. You exist with them in a peaceful way. And because you are the creature that is made in God's image, you are the one to do that. It's not the animals, right? The animals aren't going to come to you and figure out how to live in peace and harmony like in the real world. But that's the same thing if you're thinking about the psychological symbolism of your urges. Like, your anger is not going to come to you one day and be like, look, you got to stop being so angry. You're destroying your life and your marriage and alienating everyone you care about. Well, that doesn't happen. And if it did, you'd probably get mad at it did. Because, like, who the fuck is this guy trying to tell me that I don't have my shit together? Even though it's you telling yourself in anger. Like, that's not how it works. The person in charge, the person made in God's image, is the only one that has the tools to go out and do those things. And that tool is free will, by the way. That we're going to get to that. That's how that works. And then it continues. God bless them. That's pretty cool. So, God bless them to be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea and the fowl of the air, and every other. So he says it again. Second time. Make sure you get it right. Dominion over. I give you every herb bearing seed, every tree that is yielding, every beast on the earth. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made and beheld it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. So, I think there's another picture of all this. No, that's the fall. And so then you have what I just said. So that's God saw what he had made and it was very good. This is Eden. This is how it should be. This is the perfect version. This is the goal. And it's also the starting line, by the way. But it's also the goal. This state right here where you are the thing that is at peace with everything else inside you. That is the Garden of Eden. And now we're going to talk very briefly about the last thing that I'm going to cover, and that's going to be the fall. And I'm not going to cover the whole story because that's going to take too much time, but I'll pick that up next time. But I am going to set the stage. So for the fall, you have two trees, right? You got all the trees in the garden, a bunch of them. And you have the tree of life here. And then you got the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that is what we're going to show right here. So you have these two trees, and yeah, you're not supposed to touch it, God says, or you'll die. Wow. Okay. Well, that's pretty good. But you also got the tree of life, and if you eat that, you get to be in the garden all the time. So that's not too bad either. But I want to talk about those two names, and that's going to set the stage for the next episode. So at the center of the garden, there's two trees, all right? At the center of everything, psychologically, there are two paths. That's what this Genesis story says. The first path is the tree of life. Well, that path's pretty tricky to follow sometimes because that's the path that says I'm going to do the best thing I can for all life, all the time. Even if that means I have to work more than I should right now and make sacrifices for the future, for the people I care about. That person who eats that fruit, psychologically, the person who lives that message is happy. Because the thing they care about isn't something that can be taken away from them. They don't care about comparisons. They don't care about politics. They don't care about how bad it gets, and sometimes it can get really bad. Like you can get walloped for no reason. You get cancer, and then you die. Well, and good people, nobody knows how many days we're gonna get. Nobody knows the world's gonna be here tomorrow. We could get hit by a rock that we don't see coming. You get hit by a gamma ray burst and blast off the atmosphere, and the people who didn't get fried would wish they did. because after a couple of weeks of radiation, it'd be a freezing death. Like that. You get a EMP, knock out our electronics. Those things move close to the speed of light. No warning. One moment it's there, one moment it's not. But the person who cares about life and doing the best they can for life isn't limited by what their life is, because they don't care about what their life is. They only care about making it better. And that's their goal, and that's their focus. And think about that. That is the tree you eat from. That is what keeps everything balanced. Well, now you got the other tree, and that tree has a warning. Don't eat that tree or you're going to die. Okay? Well, we know what happens, but let's talk about the tree. The tree is named the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If you want to know the cause of all human suffering that is self-inflicted, that cause is the knowledge of good and evil. And the person who named that tree, from a psychologically symbolic perspective, could not have picked a better name, because people don't believe themselves to be evil. Even people who hate themselves don't think they're evil. They feel sorry for themselves. Maybe they've got a good reason to. I feel sorry for myself sometimes, and we all do. But very, very few people believe that they're just evil for the sake of being evil. It's a very zero-dimensional perspective. It's just a fantasy that someone is evil because they think a certain thing. Now, there might be people who do a lot of evil things, and those are the first things that get brought up when somebody says that deciding what's good and evil is the cause of all the problems. Well, guess what? Those are the people who are getting kicked out of the garden, just like Adam and Eve. Okay, I'm not going to listen to that. I've seen what that does. Yes, here's how it goes. You decide something's good, and you're God in your mind. You have the final say. And if I'm taking the literal interpretation of the Bible and combining it with the psychological interpretation of the Bible, God will not step in and correct you because you have free will. And he can't take that away because you need your free will to be the thing that you can be. So that includes the freedom to get it horribly wrong. And he tells you right here. It's the knowledge of good and evil. That's the trap. So anytime you find yourself thinking a bad thought because something isn't good, there's two things that aren't good going on there. There's the thing that's not good, and there's your thoughts about it. And guess what? You've surrounded yourself with both of them. And it's so natural, so easy. I spent most of my adult life trapped behind my own knowledge of good and evil. My mom, not a good mother. She wasn't a good person. She hurt people. Hurt me, my sister, my dad. And when that wasn't enough, she killed herself. But not before she did a lot of damage on the way out. So I'm left, I had to figure all that out. Well, that's too much for anybody. But, oh well, there's nobody else to do it for me. So, okay, fine, try to make a life out of it. But there was a piece that I carried with me. I guess you could call it my own personal cross. I didn't think she was worth forgiving. And I had a lot of good reasons. A lot of really good reasons. Reasons no human being would question you or press you on. They would understand. And I understand because I did it for so long. And anytime I thought about it, I was just like, no. Instantly. Like it was an instant dismissal of even the consideration that this woman deserved anything from me. And you could say objectively she didn't. And I can say objectively, from a measurable perspective, the world was a nicer place without her in it. But none of that changes the fact that she is dead. And the damage caused by the person she was not dead. Because I was keeping it alive inside myself. And I was using it on myself every time I refused to let go of it. And one thing to say you have to let go of it. It's another thing to work up the bravery to let go of it. Because it's scary as hell. And you don't want to do it because you don't know what's going to be after that. But if you don't, your other option is to die with it. That wasn't good enough for me. So that's where I got the idea, by the way, for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's when everything made sense. I was punishing myself because the highest good in my life, the highest authority in my life, was the things that I thought were good. And what that meant was, when things weren't good, I got mad. And that anger makes you do things. Makes you scared. Makes you fight. Makes you do a lot of things that are not going to make you happy. But it's all in the name of this thing that's very good, right? But if it's so very good and you've got it right, why does it feel so bad to think about it that way? And that was my clue that I was doing it wrong. Like my body wouldn't be giving me all of these messages of anxiety and depression and ADHD where I couldn't focus on anything because everything was just too much and I needed to jump around and I couldn't settle down and I couldn't pay attention and I didn't know how to interact with people and nothing made sense. That was because my goal was fixed on something that didn't exist. It only existed for me, right? Like you can't build yourself on something that exists only for you and doesn't integrate with the world. You can. It's not a good idea. No one's going to stop you, and people do versions of it all the time. All of us included. But it's that moment where you say that, you know what? What I think is good doesn't matter anywhere near as much as what I know is good for the people around me and can be manifested in the things I can do personally right now. And that ability can change over time, and maybe it's being nice one day. And maybe the next day it's, building a church or volunteering or doing a thing. And your ability to love life, the tree of life, which is the symbology I'm chasing here, it grows with you. And that is when you have access to the Garden of Eden again. Notice that the Garden of Eden wasn't destroyed. Okay, it had the angel put in front of it with a flaming sword. If we lost it forever, then why would you keep a guard nearby and keep the thing intact? You just get rid of it, right? Or it would destroy itself, but that's not what happens. That tells me that Eden is not a place that was meant to be lost forever. It's a place that you can go when you're not eating the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So in this story, it's symbology, right? And the characters are fixed. But in the symbolism of psychology, your mind, you can change stuff. You can learn new things. So as the book of Genesis goes on into the other books, that's where the journey starts to happen. Is you can say, well, man, I was Adam and Eve, and yeah, I had this thing where if I'd have just been loving life and trying to do good things, rather than getting mad about all the evils and trying to attack the evils by making more evils, well, then you filled your life with evil and you get kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Why? Because you can't fight for good and evil against evil with evil and be love and life at the same time. Like, just they're incompatible. So, okay, well, everybody's been there. Well, then what? Well, then you go to the next stories, the Cain and Abel and the flood. And then, okay, well, maybe now you've got ideas that are relatable to Abraham. And now you've got ideas that are relatable to Moses. And maybe, you can get into like the thing where, well, maybe now you're King David or Solomon. And that's kind of the path of growth that I see throughout the Bible. And that's what it all means to me. But all of it stems, every single piece of it, every unavoidable human catastrophe is rooted in people thinking they know who is good and who is evil when they don't. I can't tell you how disheartening it is to meet people who want to put you in a box based on the way you voted, or what color your skin was, or what kind of job you did, or if you had money, or if you didn't have money. Now all of a sudden, you never met this person. They only know one fact about you, and you didn't get to tell them that fact even. Somebody else told them. Or maybe it was made up. But now they've decided you're evil. Or you're good. What if that? Then they're going to want you to do stuff and think you're going to be good at it. Well, that's a different kind of expectation. They could be wrong on both counts. So that's my point, is knowledge of good and evil is an illusion, not because good and evil don't exist. You can point to actions of good and evil quite easily. In fact, they're very closely, and evil is what goes against that which is good for life, and what is bad for life is things that make it shorter or miserable. So that's not too hard, right? So whenever you know something is so good or so evil that it's okay to be evil or to feel bad because of what you know, that's getting kicked out of Eden. That's what the Bible means to me. So we're going to pick this up at another time. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hopefully you got something of value out of it. Next time, we're going to go back into the fall of man, which is the story of the serpent tempting Eve and all of that. Until then, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll make a few more until I run out of things to say or I find something else to do. Take care. Thanks for watching.